Welcome to Middle Temple, everyone, and our lovely hall. Welcome to those present with us in hall today and online to this joint Survive and Thrive and Talent Retention Working Group event on the confidence trick, how to play, how to win. One or two words about our sponsors. I'd like to thank our sponsors very much for supporting this event today. 3 Vellerum buildings and 1 Essex Court, both well-known and renowned commercial sets. So thank you very, very much. So first, one or two words about our joint groups who are hosting this event today. Survive and Thrive in Talent Retention. As many of you may know, Survive and Thrive was set up by Middle Temple in 2016 to provide stimulating ideas and guidance on many aspects of making and supporting a successful career at the bar, and extending beyond the educational and legal events the Inn provides for members. Past events have included how to think like the SAS, perform like an athlete and bounce back like an entrepreneur, thriving in the profession in adversity, perfecting the art of public speaking, and how to feel like you have it all without doing it all. Now, the Talent Retention Working Group was set up in 2020, just as the pandemic hit. And its purpose is to support and promote the interests of barristers who are either returning to the bar from time out of practice for a variety of reasons, ranging from maternity, paternity, caring, or leave to pursue other ventures, termed by us as the returner, or switching practice areas, moving from the employed to self-employed bar, or vice versa, known as a mover. As we all know, and I hope you know, this support is vital for encouraging diversity, including cognitive diversity, equality and inclusion, and stemming the loss of talent at the bar. Before I hand you over to our moderator, a few words about Master Anne Hussey. She is a very successful and well-known family money silk, specializing in high net worth individuals and offshore trusts. She's a role model for younger practitioners, having achieved her considerable standing at the family bar while bringing up 4 children. In her chambers, she currently chairs the pupillage committee and promotes outreach work in universities and schools. She regularly lectures on continuing education programs to solicitors in the bar and has volunteered her services to promote the Middle Temple Women's Forum and is an invaluable member of our working group. Thank you, Anne, and thank you to all our panelists.
Juliet, thank you very much indeed. Let me now introduce to you the panel. We have on my left Dr. Anna Colton, who is a chartered clinical psychologist and executive coach. She specializes in the bar and elite performance and stage fright. I think there's a synergy there. And in addition to her practice in the legal world, she has worked with the leads and casts of many West End shows and is the psychologist on Matilda the musical and consults in other theatrical companies. And you can see her on TV and hear her on the radio. Another radio and TV regular is your panelist to my right, Jessica Chivers, who is a coaching psychologist, author and CEO of the Talent Keeper Specialists. Her first book, Mother's Work, How to Get a Grip on Guilt and Make a Smooth Return to Work, has been dubbed the book employers should be giving all their women returners. Now, tonight we aim to tackle some difficult questions, to stimulate debate, to share ideas and experiences, and to give you all at least one takeaway point. Now, the order of running this evening is that we are going to hear from our panel on their view of advanced questions that have been submitted. And that's going to take about 30 minutes or so. And then we're going to have 30 minutes or so of questions from the floor. Having said which, at any stage, if anybody wants to put their hand up and chip in on what is being discussed, please do so. And then when we conclude in about an hour's time, we are going to enjoy some drinks and canapés and some networking. Now, I've introduced your panel, and what I have told you about them is readily available online. And what I have asked them to share with me in particular, and you, is a fact that you will not find by Googling them. I've learned some incredible things by chairing events like this in the past. There are things I could tell you about High Court judges that you won't find online. What I wanted to know was, what is it that is particular to each of you that cannot be discovered online? Well, let me share this with you. Anna shouts at the television. She shouts particularly at the television when there are episodes involving babies, when she says, "That is not a newborn." So that is her. Now, I suspect you're all going to do this. Now, Juliet has introduced me and my background. I shout at split. All right. Now, so far as Jessica is concerned, her secret fact, and this is probably very good for tonight, you probably ought to be sitting here.
Well, I do that sometimes.
You do it.
I'm sort of itching here, thinking
She's itching. She really wants to be a chat show host. Secret fact, you won't find that online. So that's the secrets to be shared about your panel. Now, this evening, we want, as I say, to stimulate some debate, to get some sharing of experiences. And it's very much to be considered, please, a fireside chat. So if you want to come forward closer to the fire, wonderful.
Hooray.
Yay, well done.
Yes,
Come on.
yes.
We've got these open front rows, and I might pick on you if you're at the back. So why don't you just come forward? Come forward.
Brilliant.
Join in, join the fight. Wonderful. Come on, come forward.
Like being at school.
Well
all
done.
over again.
Just like being at school. Yeah, come on, come on. Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's better. It's not that you won't hear me, it's just that you'll feel more included.
Still have empty front rows.
Still empty front rows. It's all right. Can I have a bencher in the front row, please? No, obviously not. Now, when we stop the session for networking, can I just please tell everybody who has joined us online, about which we are delighted because we have so many people online, we are going to keep the link open for at least 30 minutes, because while we are discussing, hopefully over drinks, what has been debated in this forum, we don't want you online to feel left out. So join the chat online. And equally well, whilst there will be the facility via the roving mic for those in the room to ask questions, equally those of you who are not with us in person, please send in any questions, comments, shared experiences via an email, and we will do our best to reach any of those that we can. So we are now going to come to our first question, dealing with this thorny topic that has been posed, the confidence trick. Anna, we've been asked what tips can easily be adopted to build confidence in being your true self, as opposed to trying to mimic the confidence of others. What would your advice be on that?
It is important to start by knowing what your strengths are, what gaps you might have, to do any kind of learning or training that will fill your gaps. But also one of the cognitive biases that we all have is confirmation bias, where our minds look for evidence in our world all around us that confirm what we believe about ourselves. And our mind simultaneously discards any evidence that comes into our world that does not confirm our beliefs. That's confirmation bias. It doesn't matter what you believe about yourself. It's not just negative beliefs. It's also, if you feel that you are very good at something, you'll find evidence to confirm that. If you feel you're poor at something, you'll find evidence to confirm that. And you won't notice evidence to the contrary. Or if you do notice it, you'll just discard it because it's not relevant to you. So it is really important to become aware of your belief sets and to actively find evidence to challenge them. It doesn't mean you have to make it up, but it's going to be there for all of us to find. Find it, notice it, and make that an active choice and something that you do on a daily basis as often as possible. And as you become more practiced at it, you will find that your self-belief shifts and your confidence starts to build. And that isn't faked. It's just changing your perspective and changing the way that your mind works. And to add to that, when you do notice things that you've done well, or if you finish something that you feel confident about, it's going to sound very cheesy, but it's not cheesy really, to celebrate it. And the brain will release dopamine when you celebrate success. It is the reward chemical. And isn't that the cuddle chemical as well? No, that's oxytocin.
That's oxytocin.
So you will get a release of dopamine when you celebrate any success or when you feel rewarded. And the brain will then want more of that. So you will change your chemical makeup, your neurochemical makeup, by noticing and celebrating your successes. It's often chucked down along with affirmations, and it all feels a bit uncomfortable to many people. But there is a real neurochemical reason why it's important to do that.
Self-congratulation. Do you believe, Jessica, that is the answer to this?
Well, I think it's part of it. And one of the things that we encourage coachees to do, particularly people who are returning to work after a break, is at the end of each day or end of each week when they're making their return to work, is to write down 3 good things that have happened each day and why. And when you do that, you are paying attention to your habits, your skills, your strengths, and so you're reinforcing the things that you have got, the things that you are good at. And when you write them down, you're lingering longer on the memory, you're more deeply encoding it. So absolutely, I think other things to say are to remember that there is strength in diversity, and it can be sometimes really difficult when you are perhaps an outlier, an anomaly. Maybe you work in a very male-dominated set of chambers and you're one of very few females. And you start to think about trying to replicate those people, the in-group, the dominant group. Instead of doing that, it's believing that there is real strength in diversity. And forgive me, but I'm going to go back to my A-levels. And I did biology on one of my A-levels. And I remember going on a biology field trip, and we studied what was in various streams. And a great environment is one that has diversity. That's how you knew that the water was really good, lots of things living there. So don't think that you have to mimic other people, be what you are, and think about your strengths and how do those strengths bring value to clients or your internal stakeholders, and know that that value is important, and go with that. Don't try and mimic and be someone else, because it feels horrible and it's naff and people can see through it.
But Jessica, you say write down the 3 best things that have happened to you this week, your 3 achievements. there may be some people who feel so undermined that by the end of the week, they're saying, I've got nothing to write on this sheet of paper. But now, how do you deal with somebody who has that mindset?
I challenge anybody, when you know you're going to complete this exercise, then you start to look for it. So what Anna was saying, so confirmation bias. So there's a part of our brain called the reticular activation system. It's the cells at the base of our brain. And that bit of the brain is responsible for spotting things that relate to things that are important to you. So, for example, if you decided that you wanted to go on holiday to Barbados this summer, you would start to notice things. You'd start to notice on the tube holiday adverts to Barbados, because that part of your brain is looking out for things important to you, important to something you want to achieve. So in the same way, if you know that you are going to ask yourself at the end of each day to write down 3 things that have gone well and why, you are primed to notice things that are going well.
Do you agree? Yes, it is a great exercise, and I often push people to 5. But if it's really difficult, don't wait till the end of the day. Write it when you notice it.
Yeah.
So that you don't wait for the lag for all of the information that has been generated in your brain to feel bad by 10 o'clock at night. You do it as soon as you notice it.
But how do you then encourage people to stop looking at the negative, to think that went really badly? How do you encourage somebody to do the positive rather than simply concentrating on, I think that went really badly? What's the strategy?
It is in understanding that we are wired to find the negative. We are primed for that because our primal brain, our animal brain, is our danger center. And so it is vigilant to threat, whatever that threat may be, 24 hours a day. And it scans for it and it alerts us to it, but it doesn't assess it. And that is the key. When information comes into our amygdala, into our primal brain, and we are alerted to there being something not okay, or some kind of danger, some kind of worry, there's no assessment of that information that takes place. And these exercises are all different ways of just changing the way you interact with the information in your brain and changing the way you interact with the way you feel about yourself. And for anybody who is struggling with confidence, they're not wanting that to carry on. You know, I defy anybody to really tell me that they want to carry on feeling miserable, inadequate.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to another question, but before I do, is there anything arising from this discussion that anybody would like to question or to share an experience in respect of? Who feels it would be a good idea to write down 3 positives? Does anybody feel that that is a useful tool? Yes, we've got a useful, yes, there's some affirmation here. Lots of affirmation from the audience.
Can I just add, do it in a book, not on your phone, so that you can flick back over it day by day or week by week. And it really does mount up. It's very simple. Might sound a little bit crass. Afraid it works. It works. It does.
Do we have the roving mic, please? We have some contribution. No. Good question. So for those of you who didn't hear, and for those of you online, is there any positive in the negative? Should you do a counter book where you write the negative, or is that not a good idea?
How is it going to help you?
To have less and less negatives by the end of the month? So if you're writing down negatives.
Oh, I see.
So then you have 3 negatives.
But then you are going against the whole point of the exercise.
So
which is to shift your belief set and to slightly alter the way that your brain perceives the information in the world around you.
Right, so the answer to your question is no.
So they can be learning in it. So I do something each week. I call it Friday 5 at 5, bit cheesy. But the idea is that I'm going to end the working week and draw a line under the working week before I sort of go into family time. And I write down 4 great things or 4 fab things. It sounds even cheesy like that. 4 fab things at 5. 4 fab things that have happened in the business this week. And then I write down the 5th one is like a learning. So it's something that I want to carry forward. Now that learning might be something negative, it might be something that's gone wrong, but it's not about dwelling on the negative, it's what is the learning? Or it might be another good thing that's happened, but I need to remember to carry that forward. So there can be learning in the negative, but let's not tune into it because we automatically do that anyway.
I'm going to move on to the second of our advanced questions. And Jessica, I'd like you to deal with this first, if you can, please. And this is really a question to deal with gender in it. It's a very important issue. How does one best navigate the perceived fine line between confidence and arrogance, particularly in women?
Well, let me give you an example then. So if someone were to say to you, that went really well, an arrogant person would say, yeah, I know. A confident person might say, yeah, I'm pleased with how it went and thank you for saying so. And someone who is lacking confidence might say, oh, no, it didn't. I did this wrong and I did that wrong. So I think there's something about saying thank you and accepting that gift when someone says that you've done something well. I think it's also about having humility, and where other people have a role to play, perhaps in some of your successes, you're able to say, oh, and of course, my team was instrumental to this, not doing yourself down and giving people credit that's not theirs. So that's one of the things that often women will say we rather than I. And in fact, there was a piece of research done many years ago, it was published in Harvard Business Review, which looked at these various different indicators of managerial and leadership qualities. And the only one that both men and women rated women lower on than men was about being visionary. And they put that down to the fact that women are more likely than men to say, we think this is a good idea, or we think this is what we should be doing in the future rather than I. So kind of watching that humility. So I think it's giving credit, but it's also about owning your success and owning your strength. It is harder though as a woman, because we know that we're expected to be very collegiate, very nice, very warm. And when we behave like that, we don't get credit for it in the way that men do. But if those things are absent, then we get marked down for it, which really pisses me off.
Saying it how it is.
Totally.
Anna, can confident women be perceived as arrogant?
Yes.
Are confident men perceived as arrogant?
Sure. But I think there is an inherent difference between confidence and arrogance, because confidence is something that is internal. You feel confident internally. You are aware of your strengths. You may also be aware of some weaknesses or some areas in which you struggle. And you know that. You don't need to tell everybody, because you inherently, innately know that you're good at this, or you feel secure in that. And that's why it becomes easy to say, oh yeah, thank you, I was pleased. Or, yeah, that did go nicely. You know, it could have gone differently, it did go nicely. Whereas when somebody is arrogant, it often comes from a place, not always, but it more often than not will come from a place of insecurity. And when you hear people being arrogant, it's them telling you how great they are. And that is usually to reassure oneself.
Is that usually men?
It can be either gender. I think we think of it more as being male, but it's not exclusively male. I don't think anything is exclusively one gender or another. But it tends arrogance, the arrogance that I think many of us go, oh, about, tends to come from a more of a deep-seated place of insecurity, where one is reassuring oneself and making sure that everybody knows they did this well, they did that well. Whereas a genuinely, truly confident person doesn't really need to put it out there, because they know it's not up for debate.
But I've heard it said that if a woman applies for a promotion or a job, she's 150% qualified. If a male applies, he's 75% qualified. And that probably comes with a degree of confidence / arrogance. Do you agree?
I think it can certainly be the case. And certainly when I work with women, I will often say, imagine that you're a bloke going for this job. How would you do it? What would you say in an interview if you were imagining you were channeling a bloke? And what would you ask for? And that can be really helpful as a tool and a technique, because it highlights the different perceptions. And then there is some playfulness that can go with it. But nonetheless, genuine confidence in either gender is often quiet.
Yeah. But Jessica, how wrong would you have to put yourself in the shoes of a man if you're a woman in order to promote yourself?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Anne, but I think we're being realistic about the way that the world works. And just to your point about women feeling that they have to have everything ticked on a role profile before they'll apply for it, versus men who sort of 60%. I think there's something to be learned from men there, because actually if you can do everything on a role profile, where is the stretch? You know, I wouldn't want to hire someone into my team who could do everything standing on their head, because I would think, well, you'll get bored. There's got to be some stretch for you. There's got to be some element of interest, of development. So always say, do go for something if you look at that and think, yes, I want to get good at that. I want to be in that role, even if I can't do everything now, then make that application.
Any contribution from the floor on this point? Does anybody want to share an experience, make a comment in respect of this chat, this link between confidence and arrogance? Gosh.
Anna, you were going to say something else.
Sorry, Anna.
Yeah. It's probably gone now.
What was I going to say? I think the other thing is that it's within your power, whoever you are, to apply. But that because you apply for something, you don't choose whether you get it. So it's also separating who makes those decisions. There is nothing wrong with applying at 60% of the job spec or of the role spec. You don't get to make the choice whether you get the role. You just prep as well as you can. And sometimes I think it's very easy to think, well, I haven't got it, therefore, you know, they're not going to want me, therefore I mustn't apply. None of that is your decision to make.
But do you find there is a different approach that you have seen professionally between when you get knocked back, when the answer's no, do women deal with that differently to men? Does it knock their confidence, the setback, when they feel they are 150% qualified? Is that knockback more difficult? Is this a gender issue?
There is, I think, a gender component, but certainly in my line of work, the people I work with, they're so individual. I couldn't do the broad brush application, and the people I work with, when I'm working with them, you know, probably are lacking some confidence at a certain degree. So I will always see that confidence knock, and there might be some, you know, anger about it or a sense of injustice. That isn't gender specific either. And it also depends on how much experience people have had of knockbacks, as to how they deal with that. And the tools in their toolbox to cope with the disappointment or the, you know, the distress that comes with it. So it is quite individual. There is probably a gender component, but I wouldn't say it's a completely gender issue.
Can I just add one more thing, Anne?
Absolutely.
So the thing about making applications when you can only do 60% of it, think of it like this. You are making a connection with a potential employer. So you might not get the job, but you've started a new relationship with a set of chambers that you might want to go and work in. And so you've kickstarted a relationship that you can then draw upon, you can build upon, you know, talk about, well, what would I need to develop in order for me to, say, get the role in the future? So it's still absolutely worth doing. And there is some research that shows female candidates are less likely to get as good a quality feedback through the interview process than men. So if you don't get the job, then make sure you push for specific feedback on where they thought the deficits were, because without that information, you then can't make changes.
Tools for dealing with those setbacks, what would your headline be?
Oh gosh, I think it's just, you know, keep on. because if you're putting yourself out there enough or a lot, you are going to get rejected. It's a bit like if every idea you have is a good idea, you're not having enough ideas, you know. So it's like rejection and setbacks are a good thing. It means you're putting yourself out there enough.
I'm going to move on to the third question, which came from one of our audience saying, someone told me the other day that before you have confidence, you need courage to enter the fray or the social event, even when you're scared. Do you have any tips for building and or harnessing that courage? Anna, how do you harness courage?
You need to remember before you go to whatever it is you're going to, why you want to go. Because if you really don't want to go, you're not going to go. Now, it may be that, you know, your leader or your friend or whoever it may be has said, can you come with me? But that's the reason you want to go. And it's so easy to forget that in the moment of anxiety when you're standing at the door. But you need to remember why you're there and what you want from it, what it might bring, what it might not. And if you're feeling something, there is definitely somebody else in that room who is also feeling it. You're not alone. And when you go into something, any kind of event like that, or anything that is nerve-wracking, we tend to believe, again, it's just human nature, that everybody is noticing how awful we are, that their focus is on us. But the reality is, most people are much more interested in themselves than in you. And so they might notice, they might not, but they're not going to be nearly as interested in you as you are in you. So if your focus is entirely on you, all you're going to notice is that you feel uncomfortable, that you're coming across as awkward, that it's a hideous experience, and you will become increasingly awkward, and it will become an increasingly hideous experience, and people will begin to notice because it will become the vicious cycle. So one thing I always say to people is, put your focus entirely on somebody else. Be really interested in somebody else. Have the conversation where they are your focus. And it comes from actually the Meisner technique in acting, where some of the greatest actors will only notice the person playing opposite them. They won't be thinking about their own lines. They won't be thinking about their blocking, about their cues. It's entirely about their opposite actor, because then you have no availability in your brain to think about you. The other person will be engaged because you're showing interest in them, and most of us might, you know, are quite happy to talk about ourselves. So if you put your attention on the other person, they'll be engaged with you. You won't be stuck in your head angsting about your conversation, your performance, and the whole thing will flow more easily. And in turn, you'll leave the event, or whatever it may be, feeling better than you expected.
Before I ask you to deal with this question, I'm just going to go down a slight side road, because it's very interesting that you've referenced acting techniques and tools in dealing with these issues. And people very often say, well, you know, the bar, you know, we're all frustrated actors. And
Do you think you are?
And it may well be, I couldn't possibly say, and it may well be that there are other tools. And one of your skill sets that you're renowned for in your working life is dealing with stage fright. And we've all had those cases. I'm in the Court of Appeal. I'm going to the Supreme Court. It feels challenging. It feels daunting. Now, you wouldn't have the brief if somebody else didn't have confidence in your ability. So it's very, I would suggest, akin to the stage fright almost that you're seeing with your acting clients. So how would you harness the skills that you use with those clients with members of the bar?
One of the things that is relevant across the board, and I spend a lot of time working with performers in any environment, is that there is nothing wrong with being nervous. It's normal. If you weren't nervous at all, you wouldn't care. Why would you be there? You have to be nervous. The task is not to get rid of it. It's to understand it and harness it to aid you rather than to hinder you. So understanding, I do a lot with kind of understanding anxiety, what happens in the brain, what happens in the body, why we feel it, so that actually you don't become fixated on it. So I do a lot of that, whatever the role. The preparation is really important. Whether you're learning your lines, you're writing your speaking note, you're writing a cross-examination, it doesn't matter. The preparation is absolutely fundamental, and you need to be certain you've done enough prep. If at all possible, if you're in the Supreme Court, I really hope you have. And then to just, not to try and get rid of it, say, okay, I can cope with these feelings. They're not going to throw me off. I can go in there and I'm not going to fixate on the fact that I've got palpitations or I'm hot and sweating. It's just normal. Everybody is feeling this. It's the adrenaline in my body that is causing these symptoms. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do the job that I am instructed to do, and to focus on that and to focus on putting the case and the job at hand rather than yourself. When you're fixated on yourself, the anxiety overtakes you, the stage fright wins. So focus on something else. You understand what's happening. You must understand what's happening in your brain and your body. Understand that, and then you can harness all of the skills that we've been talking about.
And it's not just something that is going to impact upon experienced people going into higher courts. It's likely to impact upon, the first brief that a pupil has, right? If your first brief back from maternity leave, you haven't been on your feet for months or possibly years.
Right,
So,
or the first con you do on your own.
or the first con you do.
Piece of advice you give. It doesn't matter. It's so normal. And actually, it's your friend. If you don't have any anxiety, then you're not as vigilant to what you're saying. Our senses become hypervigilant when we're anxious. It's a real benefit,
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to go back to sort of the wider point about tips for, forgive me, Anne, the original question.
No, it was harnessing courage.
Oh, harnessing courage.
Yeah, sorry, I did go down a byway.
No,
I thought it was an interesting byway.
I agree.
Right.
Good call. So I think that is about starting small and doing things, maybe it's a small thing each day or each week that feels difficult, and staying in the habit of that. And I wonder, how many of you here listen to podcasts? Stick your hand up if you like podcasts. Do any of you listen to Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO? Lucy does. Okay, so I was listening to him chat yesterday with Bear Grylls, the adventurer. And it's a really lovely episode. He's really understated. And he talked about doing sort of small challenges every day to keep that courage there, even something like having a cold shower, which I think is very courageous. So start small, do little things that take you out of your comfort zone, because that is what helps courage to grow. And you can always reference back to things that you've done that felt a little bit frightening at the time. You think, well, that felt frightening, but I did it. So I know that I can do things. I'll often have comparisons in my mind when I'm feeling worried about doing something. So it might be, oh God, I really don't want to go and stand on that stage and talk in front of X many people. Then I'll think to myself, well, but you did this when you spoke in front of 500 people, so you can do this, so keep pushing yourself. Start small. Maybe it's just a cold shower every day.
And we've got on this topic of confidence regaining, we've had a question in from somebody, one of our audience online, which I think it would be useful to take at this stage of the debate. What's the best way to regain your confidence when you've had a break and you need to get back in to doing something? And what would you advise? It's a very good question.
It is. It's to do it. You must start doing it. The natural thing is to want to avoid it. I don't think I'm ready. I'm going to I'm not going to take that case. I'll just wait another week and I'll do more prep. That is going to feed the anxiety. That is going to undermine the building of confidence, and the fear will grow and grow. You have got to just start. Doesn't matter how small, as Jessica was saying, you have to start, and you have to realize that what you want to do, which is run away, is going to make things worse. You need to do the opposite to your kind of instinct in those moments and do something. Doesn't matter how small, just do something and build from there, and say yes as much as is reasonable. Say yes as much as possible within the scope of the time you've got available and the prep you need to do.
And I think I think you've got to go back and look at the kind of work that you were doing before you were away, and think about some of the peak experiences, the wins, and take your mind back to when you were at your professional peak. And sometimes we do need to go back and talk to the people who were working with us at the time and say, you know, it's the way that you asked. It doesn't seem too icky, but it's, you know, I've been away for 9 months. Can you just help me remember some of the things I was doing and what I was actually good at? So you're not going out fishing for compliments. You're making it clear that this is, you actually really need some help remembering this stuff. I think that's a really important thing to do.
Actually, on that note, mentoring. Yeah, you need to set yourself up with a support network. You can have a mentor within Chambers, you can have a mentor outside Chambers. You don't only need one, for example. But even if you've got all the support structures, even if you've got the mentors, you still have to go and do it.
And that's a very practical piece of advice, because if you've got a mentor, you're not then, that's a very discreet relationship. You're not opening your weaknesses or your perceived weaknesses up to colleagues, which some people might feel reticent about.
Totally. And I think there's something that we talk to a lot of our coachees about before they go on a planned period of leave. And that's to whip out your iPhone, talk to that iPhone, record a message for your future self. So before you even go, is to record a message for that future self to listen back to, where you talk about, you know, what am I proud of? What have I done in the last 12 months that was a particular highlight for me? What's the positive feedback I'm receiving from clients, from peers, the people around me? What am I looking forward to about coming back to work? And then you can replay you to yourself in X many months' time. It's only you for you. And go, oh my God, yeah, I was working on that. Yeah, I did do really well at that. So that's sort of setting up a good return before you even go.
And have you had people who've done that?
Yes.
And for whom that has been
Yes.
really positive,
Yes.
really encouraging?
Yes.
So you've got practical examples of where that has worked.
Yes, absolutely. It does work, because it's you seeing you as you were. You're seeing how you were dressed, you were seeing how well turned out you were, you're talking with real authority and authenticity, because you're right there in it, in the cases before you go on leave. You're not having to try and remember, you know, so it works.
And another question from one of our audience who's listening remotely. What are the simplest and most effective bits of daily training someone can do to work on their confidence? Now, you've talked about coming to the end of the week, but I think we've to some extent covered that and writing down what's been good. And I think you've also said, well, don't necessarily leave it to the end of the week.
No, not the end of the week.
I mean,
not even the end of the day.
So I know, I think this was your point. I think this very specifically answers the question from this member of the audience to say, yeah. But so that's recorded. But is there anything else that's other than recording positives? Are you saying that perhaps you ought to be forcing yourself out of your comfort zone on a daily basis?
Well,
to say, I really don't want to do this, but I've done it.
My son would say no, because he believes it's called a comfort zone for a reason, and therefore you should stay in it. But yes, I do think that you don't have to go terribly far out, but you must do, because we get stuck thinking. And actually, when there is something big that happens, we don't have time to think about it. When you're actually on your feet in court, you're just doing it. You're not ruminating on it in that moment. You might do that before, you might do that after, you might do that when you sit down and your opponent's speaking. It doesn't really matter. But you're not doing it in that moment. In that moment, you're present. Anxiety, which is what most of this is about, anxiety lives in the future. You can't be anxious about right now, and you can't be anxious about what's gone. You could only be anxious about what's
But
coming.
what is
So-
likely to come and what has happened before feeds on the current mindset, doesn't it?
Feeds on the mindset,
Mm.
doesn't necessarily feed on the reality.
Mm.
Just because you think something doesn't mean it's true. A thought is not a fact necessarily.
No.
And just because you feel something also doesn't mean it's true. We call that emotional reasoning, and we all do it, but it's a big pitfall. You know, we feel anxious, therefore we believe we're in danger. That's emotional reasoning. It's not the moment. So trying to stay present in the moment is really important. Trying to prevent yourself being sucked into the future too often is important. And yes, there's the writing down and the recording, but I would really advocate just noticing. You know, you don't have to write everything down. It doesn't have to be a big drama, but just, oh, actually, I thought that was going to go badly. It didn't. Oh, I've just had that phone call. Oh, it was fine. I don't know what I was reading. Just observe and notice. And then you can record if you want. But the whole purpose of all of this is just to shift your bias and your beliefs and your observation of yourself so that tomorrow or later, you've got a little bit more kind of fuel in the confidence tank, which you build slowly.
Jessica, how important are third parties in filling that confidence tank? Or is it something that needs to come internally?
It's like you read my mind. So today,
I'm rather good at that, according to my children
I
anyway.
must be very careful then. So I was working with someone very senior today in a media company, and she was reflecting on the fact that the more senior you become, the less praise and recognition you receive. And it can feel really lonely at the top and not knowing whether you're doing a good job. We all need to receive recognition. And so I think how this ties in here, what I was thinking about is certainly in a corporate setting, when we are working with someone who wants to hone or polish or develop a particular skill, and it's difficult and it's requiring confidence and courage to do that, we'll often say, okay, tell someone, tell a peer or tell your line manager, tell somebody who is in a position to notice, to see that thing. So it might be, you know, want to get better at chairing meetings or, for example, presenting, whatever it might be. And so you would tell a third party, say, this is something that I really want to work on. It would be great if you could just watch out for those occasions where I'm doing that and tell me when I'm doing it okay, or tell me when I'm making improvements, because then again, you're priming that person to look at you and to be able to give some positive feedback. And forgive me, I don't think this really goes on in the world of Chambers, but it's certainly in the corporate world, big corporates. You know, performance reviews are something that happen every 6 months or every year, and it can be really icky when you're asked to do 360-degree feedback reviews on people. And you think, oh God, I haven't got a clue what that person has been doing this year, or what the behavioural piece. You know, going back to what Anna was saying, you know, we don't tend to notice other people as much as we're paying attention to ourselves. So if you prime someone to be looking out for something that you're doing and to give you some positive feedback, you're more likely to get it, because people are wrapped up in their own world, so they're not necessarily likely to come and tell you you did a fantastic job chairing that meeting, or think that you need to hear that. So that's how you can ask other people.
Even more so, I would suggest, at the bar. I'm not likely to get somebody coming up and saying, well, you did fantastically.
No, and there
If
are
it's your opponent.
lots of conversations to be had about how much feedback would be rather better at the bar than the very minimal amount there is post pupillage. But yes, absolutely.
And most chambers now, pupillage feedback, as I understand it, is excellent. It's really good. But then it tails off, doesn't it?
Right.
And the only feedback you're going to get as to whether you were any good or not is whether you get another brief.
And that is no way to actually develop a career, develop and hone a skill set. That's why I said there's a whole conversation to be had there about, you know.
Well, it sounds like we've got another debate on our hands in respect of that, and we're not going to be able to cover that within the few minutes that we put there. I would just very briefly, because this is something that has been raised, and I think it's important that we just touch upon it. People have asked a variety of questions dealing with the issue of imposter syndrome. Now, that may or may not be relevant in terms of looking at confidence. And I think it's very important that we just understand the terms and what is meant by this. So what I'm going to ask you each to do for us, please, is to just, in words of not more than one syllable in one sentence, right, tell us what is imposter syndrome, Anna?
It is the belief or the very strong feeling that you are a fraud, that what others believe of you is genuinely incorrect. Not just that you don't really think that you're as great as they may say, but what they say has no foundation.
Elton John, I'm not the man they think I am at all. In one of his songs, that's absolutely what it is. It's that you think that someone holds a false positive view of you and you're not going to live up to it and you're going to be found out.
So how do you counter? Well, let's roll back. So that's your definition of it. In your professional experience, how prevalent is it?
It is a phrase that is commonly used inaccurately. So we hear a lot about imposter syndrome when actually what we mean is I am doubting myself or I feel a bit anxious. Not that many people actually genuinely have imposter syndrome. And I was saying earlier, before we came online, that I think I've worked with one person in 18 years of coaching who I think had genuine cause to say that she had imposter syndrome. And that was, she was very senior, worked in innovation, and she was approached for a job where she was going to be needed to generate lots of innovative ideas. And she said, I've got this reputation as this fantastic ideator, this innovator, was actually, I'm not actually that creative. I'm great on the strategic stuff, but it's always been my team that's come up with the innovative stuff. So I have got this label for being good at this thing, and I hand on heart can say that is not a strength of mine.
Yes, I would say genuine imposter syndrome is uncommon. It really is, but it's bandied around everywhere.
You hear it a lot.
Everywhere, because it feels so much, oh yeah, I've got some imposter syndrome. You kind of haven't, you're just lacking a bit of confidence, or you've got a bit of self-doubt, which is normal.
Wrong labelling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wrong label. Now, I am now going to open this debate up to the floor for comments, questions, experience sharing. Oh, yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you for all those tips. I think they were really useful. One thing I just wanted to pick up on is when you're talking about recording or noticing positives, things that you've done well, do you think it's important to notice the little things, the things that we don't think about? So, you know, a phone call or running an errand or doing your housework even, just that noticing all the things you've achieved, even when you don't feel like you've achieved a lot. I've always sort of thought that that's quite a helpful thing when you think I've done nothing today. Well, actually list what you've done. It may be quite a lot.
I agree, it's the have done list. And it's particularly helpful when you're feeling a bit low, very tired, inadequate, your back's up against the wall, is to write down what I have done.
Do you think it is counterproductive over your morning coffee to write a I have got to do these list? Because then you get to the end of the day, and if you've only crossed one off, that might be sort of not a good feeling.
But it depends how good you are being. But
or would you say, well, I've crossed off one, that's good enough?
Well, it depends how good your sort of estimation of how long things take you. Because if you can be realistic about, you know, you've got 3.5 hours to play with, can you really do this, and this? That's just fantasy. That's a wish list. That's not a to-do list. Yeah. So my technique is I time block. So my diary is always full because I'll time block things that are not just meetings with other people, but it might be, you know, spend 90 minutes on this pitch deck or spend 60 minutes researching this client to be able to go and present to them or whatever it is. So I put the time actually in my diary, so I'm very able to see how much can get done and what can't get done.
And are you an advocate of what I've heard said in the corporate world, is that when you go in with your to-do list, you chew the frog?
Absolutely. Monday morning, do the most difficult thing.
Yeah.
Do not start fanning around with emails. Get in the office early. Do something difficult. Do something that is thought
So chewing the
intensive.
frog is the difficult thing.
Yeah.
first.
It's what I call deep work. It's
Yeah.
doing the deep work, the things that's complex, that needs your best attention. Do it, and then reward yourself with fanning about with emails.
But then if you're fanning about, you tick, 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 tick. I've
Yeah,
done
but
all
you
that.
haven't done
And you
the
only
meaningful
tick
stuff.
one frog.
Yeah, but you haven't done the meaningful stuff. You
Right.
haven't done the deep work, the important stuff, the stuff that's going to earn the fees.
Right.
Or the stuff that stops you being anxious.
And it's probably
Spot
the
on.
chewing the frog point,
Right.
which is the one that is going to be anxiety inducing. So get it off the list.
And the procrastination will build and build
Yeah,
and build.
and then you just
the
won't want
longer
to deal
you
with
put
it.
off, and the panic will build, and the whole thing will be very uncomfortable.
Yes, gentleman in the middle row. Thank you. Microphone coming.
What I use is I produce a slightly bigger list and with very easy tasks, and then I cross them very quickly, which then encourage me at the end of the day because I've already achieved something. I may not, so I'm not thinking the negative, oh, this were minor tasks, but I'm thinking as a whole list, oh, I already did 50 or 60% of it. So this then carries me forward to the rest of it.
That. If that works for you, carry on doing it is what I would say. But
I call those things 5-minute fillers. So
Right.
that for me is a break. So it's do something big for 90 minutes, and then if I'm working from home, go and unstack the dishwasher, and then do some planning about with the emails. 5-minute fillers.
I don't think it matters. If it works for you, do it.
absolutely, yes. Anything else from the floor? There must be something. Shared experience, another difficult question for one of our. You've got these experts here. Challenge
Okay,
them.
it's an observation of a practitioner at the bar. A lot of what you're saying seems to be very generic about feel good about yourself, but I think in terms of confidence as a practitioner, you have to really work on your case. You have to know who the judge is, and it's really looking at the evidence, looking at the law, and that is what gave me confidence as a practitioner. And a lot of this corporate, it's feel good about yourself. If you're feeling great about yourself, but the judge thinks you're off on self-indulgence, you don't know your case. To me, I would say to any pupil, go back to the case, go back to the law, go back to the evidence. And that's as a practitioner. A lot of this is how to feel good at a party. It doesn't resonate with me as a barrister.
I think Anna made the point beautifully when she talked about prep.
It's prep. Yeah, absolutely. It's the
You have
prep,
got to do the
which
prep.
is exactly what you are endorsing.
Yeah.
Know your facts, know the law, know your tribunal. And so those are the basics for our profession. What we're getting here is the added value of extra confidence tactics. Juliet.
I was just making the point that for me, my own experience, it's not necessarily the prep that and the result that gives me the reward. It's how I internalize, how I perform. So on some occasions, I've got a good result, but I felt I performed badly. On some occasions, I've got a bad result, but I know there is nothing more I could have done.
But isn't that
to
what you
improve
want to feel when you walk out of any professional situation? I did my best. And if you can tell yourself that.
Sometimes that's going to be good enough. Sometimes you might feel your best is inadequate. The key, if you don't feel you've done it, you do need to go back and analyze where do I feel I fell down and what contributed to that? Was it that, you know, my opponent put me off? Was it that my prep, although I thought it was adequate, actually there were holes in it? Was it that, you know, what was it? It's all very well and good to feel that you weren't on your A game, but it's no use to you if you don't then sit down and work out what you will do next time that is different, so that you are more likely to be on that A game next time. And you know, it's not only the prep. I think it is the prep's fundamental. It is also about, if there are gaps in your knowledge, fill them. If there are gaps, and your knowledge doesn't have to be necessarily legal knowledge, but if there are gaps in, you know, how do I stand up and articulate my points? Do the advocacy training, or top up your advocacy training. So it's a holistic thing. And of course, everybody is different. So it's individualized.
Jessica, it's being said that what's being discussed here and the tricks in respect of gaining confidence are very corporate focused. To what extent do you feel that it is relevant to life and practice at the bar, these tools that we've been discussing?
Well, I think people are people, and we're talking about many different settings, not just the courtroom. So lots of the questions that were sent in advance were about networking, for example, and there's a really good translation of corporate experience into that, because it's people meeting people, for example.
And networking is about what we're going to be doing very, very shortly. And so to conclude, I'm going to deal with some of those networking questions very briefly. Firstly, do you have any tricks to joining a conversation at a networking event when there are 2 or 3 people already chatting? Some people are really skillful at joining that group and the conversation. How do you do it? So you've got this clique. How do you, on your own, sharp elbow a clique?
So there's the obvious one, which is, oh my goodness, your jacket is splendid. So we start with some ingratiation. And my favorite is always to look around the room and see who looks like they're having the best time. What are the body language vibes that are being given off? And I will make a beeline and say, you look like you're having a fascinating conversation. Can I earwig? And then they will say, of course. And then the gap will open up, because they're not just going to let you stand there and earwig. They're going to open up and let you join in the conversation.
Earwigging at drinks parties? Is that the way to elbow into a group?
I have to confess, it's not my forte. But it is about connection, isn't it? It's about trying to connect on some level with somebody, so that you're not standing there on your own feeling like it's excruciating and awkward and trying to run away.
And the probability is that if you're on your own, there will be somebody else on their own. So it's this scan the room. Who else looks as if they are on their own?
Totally, and you can head it off before you even go there. So I think about networking opportunities as something that I might invite potential clients or clients to. If there's something, I always remember I went to a live recording of an episode of Woman's Hour, and I invited a potential client along. She thought this was wonderful that I've got tickets to this at Broadcasting House. And so you're going with someone, or you intend to meet somebody there, so you're not walking in cold. You've set something up in advance.
And the other tip when scanning the room that I've heard, tell me if you think this is legitimate or not, is that when you're looking at your groups who are having a good time, and this is a body language point, you've got the closed groups and you've got the slightly open groups who've got the potential for a third party to join. If you've got a really closed, you're going to have difficulty getting into that group. Body language. Do you agree that you've got to really target those who've got a slightly open group?
I think it is much easier when you've got an opening in a group because you can literally go and put yourself in it. When you're standing outside it,
Yeah.
you know, one, it looks a bit strange. Two, you feel you feel that you are really a Billy No Mate having a bad time. Yes, of course, you know, it is important. And most people, I think, have been in that situation of feeling, I don't want to be here, this is terrible, and are quite benevolent if you're on your own.
And one of the questions was, what are the best conversation starters at an event when you're on your own? And as you've said, you've commented on my jacket. And I use this. I wore this deliberately this evening. I use this as part of my strategy when I go to events, when I think I'm not going to know anybody there, because inevitably somebody comes up to me and says, I love your jacket, and that starts a conversation. So that's all we've got time for so far as Q&As are concerned, but I hope we're going to continue this conversation over drinks. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for the questions. Thank you to our live audience. Thank you to our online audience. Now, we are going to go and enjoy drinks and canapes, courtesy of our sponsors, 3 Verulam Building and 1 Essex Court, for which a huge thank you. And an in parenthesis, but in loud, shouty capitals, a thank you to Lucy for helping to facilitate all of this. Thank you, Lucy. I would like you all, please, in the time-honoured way, to thank our panel, Dr. Anna Colton and Jessica Chivers. Thank you, ladies, very much indeed for sharing your experiences. Now, I am going to impose a rule over drinks, and that is the rule of 3. Now, this was something that was imposed by one of our previous Master Treasurers, Dawn Oliver. And the rule of 3 is you are not allowed to leave the building until you have spoken to 3 people who you haven't spoken to before. Ladies and gentlemen, drinks.
Wonderful.